All right, this is One Last Midnight, and welcome back to another episode of the Dyson Sphere Program. Today we're going to look at the Dyson Sphere and some strategies on how to use it. The actual Dyson Sphere itself, not the program. You know, the thing that produces power around your star. Yeah, that's what we're going to look at today. There's actually two parts to the Dyson Sphere. There's the Dyson Swarm, which is the solar sails that's flying around this particular star. And then there's the actual physical structure that's built around the star. You can see that in the screenshot here. In order to create the Dyson Swarm, you're going to need several pieces of research and several items that you're going to have to build. You're going to have unlocked the solar sails, the ray receiver, and eventually the planetary ionosphere utilization. One of the key components to making the Dyson Swarm is the rail ejector, solar sails, and ray receiver. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that the Dyson Swarm isn't very effective, and I think they're just not using it correctly. To maximize the uses of the Dyson Swarm, I set up EM rail ejectors on several different locations on the planet. So if I zoom out on my planet, you can see here that I've got it set up in 4 different locations along the equator. And along the equator is important because the equator faces the sun the most, and the rail ejectors are going to be most efficient when they're facing the sun. I have tested it on the poles, and they don't work very efficiently on the poles. The angle is too sharp. Now, all these are off for a reason, because I wanted to show you that currently my Dyson Sphere has 0 solar sails in the swarm, and it's producing 0 megawatts of power. I have set up 10 different orbits just because I love seeing 10 different orbits in there. When it gets populated, it looks really, really cool. After I've fired them up, you can see, because it's based on the equator and I have them set out at pretty much equal distance apart, I'm going to have 2 sections firing off pretty much almost all the time. And if I zoom out, you can see that the solar sails are getting shot off into the Dyson Swarm off in the distance. So it's populating those 10 orbits. If I look at my Dyson Swarm, you can see I've got 1,000 solar sails in there, and I'm already producing 37 megawatts of power, which is awesome. But this is not where you stop, right? You obviously just keep going and pumping in solar sails into this whole system to make it produce even more power. Now, over time, as you're pumping more and more solar sails into the Dyson Swarm system, your power generation is going to get pretty significant. You can see I've got over 7,000 solar sails into the system. I'm generating 265 megawatts of power, and it's looking really cool now. Matter of fact, if I look up into the sky, you could see the Dyson Swarm off into the distance. Looks really neat. There's a solar system view. I mean, check that out. I mean, that is just cool stuff, right? Solar sails only have a life of 1,800 seconds when you first get them. But there is a whole line of research that you can invest into to increase your solar sail lifespan. When you're done researching the solar sail life research line, the solar sails will last for 3,600 seconds, which is actually 60 minutes. So that's fantastic. So 60 minutes of life per sail. Sails are going to last a long time. They're going to stay in the swarm for a longer time, and you're going to be able to produce power for a longer time. In order to receive the power from the Dyson Sphere, whether it be the Dyson Swarm or the actual physical structure of the Dyson Sphere, you're going to need the ray receivers. So if you've watched my video on power strategies, you'll know that the planet's north and south pole receive sunlight pretty much constantly. You'll have one that receives more and one that receives less, depending on the axis of your planet. And if you place the ray receivers at your poles, you'll be able to benefit from this long-lasting sunlight, and even the dim twilight will still generate power. So I had placed these ray receivers down a while ago, and they've been continually generating power. And let me show you the difference. When you put down a brand new ray receiver, what happens is that continually receiving will start to increment, and you'll see that the maximum output and efficiency are kind of a little bit low. If you leave this in an area where it continually receives power, that ray receiving efficiency will go up. So currently right now it is 30%, but these that have been sitting here, I think this is the first one I placed down, is now generating at 58%. So you can see the difference, right? Here's the first one. It's only receiving 5.2 megawatts and it's slowly growing, where this one is receiving 12.5 megawatts because I've had it continually receiving power and the ray receiving efficiency has gone up over time. Of course, it also matters on how much power is inside of the Dyson Swarm. You can see I have 254 megawatts of power, so I'm able to pull more power down. So I currently have 8 here, but I could easily put 10 here, and if it's 12.5, that's 120-ish megawatts of power that I'm receiving from these ray receivers all the time. And if I've got them into my power network, like I do with the wind turbines that span the entire planet, then I'm able to receive that power everywhere. Now, if I double down on this and put it on the opposite pole, I will get the same efficiency because it will continue to keep running and it'll grow over time, and I'll be able to double up the amount of power that I'm receiving. There's one additional thing though. You can automatically increase the efficiency of the ray receivers by researching ray transmission efficiency, and there are several different levels of that. It goes all the way up to transmission efficiency 8, and this transmission efficiency 8 you can keep investing into over and over and over again. So by completely investing into ray transmission efficiency all the way up to the 7th level, the efficiency of my receivers are now at 81%. There's one more piece of research that's important to the ray receivers. We talked about it earlier, but it's the planetary ionosphere utilization, which will allow you to use the graviton lens inside of the ray receivers. So if I put graviton lenses inside of this ray receiver, you can see that it is now producing 25 megawatts of power as opposed to 12.5 megawatts of power. That's a huge increase in power utilization, and it's just consuming the graviton lenses, and it's doing it slowly, so it's not like it's eating up the graviton lens extremely fast. I'm getting some longevity out of the graviton lens. You can see it's a quarter a minute. So you can make the ray receivers highly efficient by investing into research that will allow you not only to increase the strength of the ray receiver, but also to use the graviton lens. The second part to the Dyson Sphere power is the actual Dyson Sphere itself. And with that, you're going to need 3 pieces of research unlocked. You're going to need the high strength, lightweight structure, vertical launching silos, and also towards the end, you're going to need Dyson Sphere stress systems. Some items that are going to have to be made are the Dyson Sphere components, which are going to get shipped off into the small carrier rockets that you're going to have to make. And you're going to also have to make the vertical launch silos in order to send these off into space. Setting up the orbit for this is slightly different than setting up the orbit for the Dyson Swarm. When you actually go into the editor to edit your layer, you get this, here's essentially, this is going to be the diameter. This is going to be your orbit for your Dyson Sphere. But you're going to actually have to make the Dyson Sphere yourself. You could design how you want this structure to lay out. So an example of this would be, I noticed that these can only be spaced like 2 apart. Oh, before we go any farther, you can actually stop the rotation by unchecking run game. It helps in creating this structure. So you wind up grabbing a node and placing down a node. And then what you can do is you can actually wind up building, if I go 2 down and 2 down and 2 down, and then another 2 down, another 2 down, and another 2 down, and then make connections between these 2 and others. Let's remove this one. And then make some cross connections. And another cross connection, and let's actually remove this internal connection and make another cross connection like this. Gotta make it all look the same. So you're going to have to draw out your your structure for the Dyson Sphere, which is, I thought was pretty neat. It's pretty neat little interface. So this removes them. This allows you to select multiple groups. If you wanted to select a whole group, you can build a curve, you can build a straight line, or you can place a single point down. You can go between a grid, or you can go between this little hatch hair scenario. You have varying different choices on how you want to set it up, and then you're not restricted to it. You can place one down with the crosshairs, and then the other one down with the hatch system. Build it however you want to build it. Make it look as cool as you want to make it. I guess I could put like one last midnight as part of a Dyson Sphere, and it would totally work. Once you have this all placed out and laid out and designed, then you need to actually start launching these small carrier rockets into space. And there they go. They go take off, right? If I go look at the Dyson Sphere itself, you can see that they're jetting over to this area over here, and they're slowly building this thing up. They're only bringing so many pieces at a time. It's not, you know, they're not bringing in a ton of pieces at a time. If you go back and you look at the vertical silo, you can see how many pieces are actually needed to complete the structure. This needs 1,000 of the small carrier rockets in order to make the complete Dyson Sphere that I made. But here's what's interesting. You'll notice that when we're looking at the Dyson Swarm, yeah, it was like thousands, literally thousands of solar sails. And it was producing 200 and something megawatts of power. This tiny little structure, and it's not even complete yet, is already producing 37.5 megawatts of power. And I had an enormous amount of space to work with in order to be able to build the solid Dyson Sphere. So this Dyson Sphere, the physical one, is going to produce more power than the Dyson Swarm. And the other big caveat behind it is that it's permanent. You don't have to worry about the solar sails going away after a period of time. Once this is complete, it is complete, and it's constantly generating power for you. As you can see, this one little structure is complete. It's producing 96.1 megawatts of power. That's pretty great. I mean, that's that tiny little structure. That's 1,000 of those small carrier rockets was able to produce this structure, and it's going to generate power forever. if you're a Sandlot fan, forever. So, I mean, imagine it. Just think about it for a second. If you invest your time, effort, and energy into producing the Dyson Sphere, then you're really not going to have any power problems whatsoever. You're going to receive that power exactly the same you would from the Dyson Swarm. You're going to use these ray receivers, and we already talked about that in length and how to use them. And so, you know, I just think you cover both poles with these ray receivers, and you're gathering up enough power that you can use on your power system on any planet. And here's the big thing, it's on any planet. It doesn't matter what planet you go to in your solar system. I happen to have 3 landable planets in this solar system. One is very, very far away, but I've got a couple that are close. And you can see that, look, my wind ratio, my solar ratio on both of these, on this planet over here, is garbage, right? I'm not going to get much power off of wind and solar this far away. So I'm going to have to rely on something like the Dyson Sphere to be able to pull in the power that I need. You know, my other planet happens to do pretty well on solar energy. It's 117%, but not so much on wind energy. I'm still going to take advantage of the Dyson Sphere because that power is sitting here ready for me to use. So that's the benefit behind the Dyson Sphere and why you would want to use the Dyson Sphere. So there's one other piece to the Dyson Sphere power line, and that is the artificial star. Actually, if you look at the research, you can see that it is part of the main line, and it is right here. Right before you get to the universal matrix and then actually mission complete. Now, I talked about the artificial star in the grasping power video. I also talked about deuterium, but I touched on them lightly, and the main reason why is because I don't have a huge production line for deuterium or antimatter. That's something that I will do in the future, and when I do that, I will go in and I'll expand upon those production lines and the best way to produce deuterium and the best way to produce antimatter. But unless you have an antimatter production line, the artificial star is not going to be very useful to you. It kind of falls outside of the whole Dyson Sphere concept, which is sustainable energy, gathering energy from the sun, and not having to worry about, producing some resource to burn. So I lumped in the deuterium and also the artificial star into Grasping Power video because that really talked about, power sources that you have to use some sort of resource to convert into electricity. So I thought it fit there, but technically the artificial star falls underneath Dyson Sphere Power. That's it for me. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. I'd love to have you in the community. If you want to follow me on any of my social media, you can find the links in the description below, and make sure to hit that notification bell. That way you know when I go live and when I post new videos. I'll talk to you later. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.